When you left America,
yes,
did you think that you would be fighting a seemingly uphill battle in terms of these civil lawsuits?
No, I didn't know what I was getting into. Believe you me, I started this sort of stuff in '95 when I took on what was called academic apartheid. You people out there that like reading books, get Ivan Hall. Ivan Hall, Hall, you see right there, okay. Cartels of the Mind. Cartels is an oil cartel of the mind, right there. It's a very good book on the closed shops that, keep foreigners out. Talks about press cartels, talks about academic cartels, all sorts of ways to keep just foreign ideas at bay and not let them get too enfranchised. Well, anyway, it's very good in the fact that I was getting involved in the academic apartheid system, where foreigners are on contracts if they work in universities full time, and at one time it was
1 year contracts, right?
1 year or 3 year. Okay. Without boring your readers with all the details, I was working in a university. I saw this. I saw my friends getting affected by this. They couldn't buy houses. They couldn't get into pension systems. They worked for 15 years and said, "Oh, you're too expensive. Go away." And you couldn't do that to Japanese. So I started speaking out against that, and it's addictive, this. And it's very addictive because the more you do, the more you can do. See, if you don't do anything about something, what do? You go and you cry in your beer, boo-hoo, life is unfair, right? But if you do something about it and it turns out for the better, you say, my goodness, I'm glad I did something. And if you do something and it doesn't turn out well, you say, well, at least it's stress reliefs, right? You can, it's in almost all cases, I've actually said, all right, well, at least I tried. And when it does turn out well, you get enough of those under your belt, you say, my goodness, this is sustainable. So, no, when I came over here to begin with, I was not expecting to get involved in any of this sort of thing. I didn't know this was happening.
I'm kind of interested in the activism aspect of all this. For example, I was curious if you knew of other activists in the same sort of realm of equal rights, liberty. What words do we want to say for this?
Well, I would say simply, equal rights is fine.
Equal rights.
I don't mind that.
Are there other, besides yourself, are there other activists you know of in Japan?
Sure, lots.
Can you give us some a rundown?
We have Ana Bortz, who is the Brazilian journalist who was turned away from a jewelry store in 1998, who took her case to court and won, and set up the whole thing. It's in my book. Oops, plug. And there is
Hold it up again.
Oh, actually.
Oh, okay. We have another. Okay.
There's two books, but anyway.
Let's get that.
Yes. And the other one's the English version. And so. She did that. There's other people involved. Ivan Hall, as I mentioned, who wrote the book on this. He took this up with the ministries, the whole aspect of academic apartheid. Olaf, my friend, also in this case, has also done some very good works. You just meet them, but they don't necessarily get a lot of press. That's why you might not have heard of them.
Right.
I mean, there's a certain my friend Michael Fox, who follows criminal court cases.
Okay.
He's down in Osaka. He wrongful trials, wrongful arrests, immigration overstays, and the conditions in prisons. But trust me, there are lots of people out there. Who gets the press is one thing. I'm not quite sure why people have heard of me. I guess it's just because I write a lot and I speak a lot. They do too. They write a lot and they speak a lot. I don't know. Maybe I'm charmed. Maybe I'm charming. I don't know. But trust me, I'm not alone.
So what civil lawsuits for discrimination against foreigners that you have not filed have you taken a particular interest in? What other civil lawsuits?
Okay. I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if this is a previous episode by now, I mentioned the Ana Bortz case, the Brazilian woman that was refused entry into a jewelry store in 1998, who took her case there and won. She won in 1999. That was the first real big case. But of course, even before then, there was, like, for example, Kathy Morikawa versus the Japanese government, when we still had gaijin cards with the fingerprints on them. The Zainichi Koreans were fighting that for 20 or 30 years, because fingerprints on the gaijin cards is a sign of criminality. Giving your fingerprints has a criminal tendency association. Many people said, we're not going to comply with that. there weren't any arrests, but they were trying to fine them. In other words, take money from them, right, as in a fine. And some people even refused to carry their gaijin cards around. That's not a civil lawsuit. However, when she was arrested, when she had to go to court and appear with that, there was a general amnesty granted in 1989, I think it was. And by 1993, all permanent residents no longer had to give their fingerprints. And by 1997, I think it was, they said no more fingerprints, period. Unfortunately, the bad news is that thanks to anti-terrorism laws coming into effect now, they're reinstating fingerprints for people who enter the country. So don't go home, anybody. Okay. Nice. Other civil lawsuits. Of course, there was some Zainichi Koreans that have filed a lot of lawsuits against the government for not being included in the pension plan, for not receiving enough compensation for wartime services. You've all heard of the Comfort Women case, I'm sure. I mean, we're talking about consigning it only to foreigners. There's also some illegal people that were Zainichi, Koreans or Chinese, trying to get into public housing, and they were refused because they're not citizens, which is illegal. And they took it to court and won. There was a case that came down in January of this year. Lee, a person by the name of Lee and his wife, that sued the government for, sued the realtor for excluding them from apartment. They won. But the one you've probably heard of recently, it came down on January 30th, was the McGowan case. Steve McGowan, the African-American gentleman who was refused entry into an eyeglass store.
Kyoto, right?
That's right, yes. Yes. I've written a number of articles about that. You can read them on my site, of course. Okay. And he lost his case because the judge said, well, I don't trust his testimony because he doesn't seem to speak enough Japanese. I see a lot of potential for abuse there. And I don't trust his wife's testimony because she didn't ask specifically whether it was discrimination against black people as opposed to discrimination against foreigners. So I said, well, since you're suing for discrimination against black people, you don't have any evidence of that. Sort of like, you were I got hit by a car. I'm hurt. Somebody give me compensation. And the guy says, no, you weren't hit by a car. You hit by a truck. No compensation for you, right? It's ludicrous. So it's on appeal. But there are plenty of cases out there, people doing this. People, if you think that suing in Japan is not a Japanese activity, I beg to differ. 1998, there were 5.5 million suits in Japan. Wow. Criminal, civil, family, higher, upper, no, all levels of court, 5.5 million. Filed by foreigners? No. Filed by Japanese. Duh. So if you think Japan is not a litigious society, I'm sorry, I beg to differ. Yes?
Like, for example, what kind of coverage have the activists got from the Japanese media? Because I thought they would try to quell...
It's not quite so bad. If you're talking about the Yomiuri or the Shimbun or the Sankei Shimbun, they practically ignore this case unless it involves something juicy. If it's something like Mainichi Shimbun, they've almost always covered us. Kyodo News, Wire Service has always been helpful on this. Asahi Shimbun's been a mixed bag. Japan Times has been helpful. But yes, if you're not reading the Japanese media, you're probably not going to see a lot of this because, just about every day there's something out there that there's a social problem that somebody takes up and that makes the newspaper. And if it's not, this murder that happened just a couple of days ago over in what was it, Nagahama, of I don't know if she's ethnic Chinese or Chinese,
right,
had a fit.
Okay.
Well, people are talking about that in terms of, well, wasn't there a language barrier, or was she frustrated being here in Japan? They're trying to make a larger social problem out of this. When you're looking for motive behind certain events that catch the public eye, pretty soon, especially if it involves anybody, foreign or of foreign descent, that becomes a play. That becomes a sales point.
Okay. Just a very quick audio test. Audio test.
Yeah.
Just say something.
That's a good idea. Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota.